This video is about timber stand improvement cut that I'm doing on my property. It shows cutting down a number of trees and hooking up with a winch on a tractor and pulling them out. You'll often hear timber stand improvement cut shortened to TSI. So if you hear TSI, that's what they're talking about. In this situation, I've had the DEC come in and mark about 6 acres, a little over 6 acres, for this improvement cut. This is a free service. I'm in New York State, so it's a New York State DEC will come in and do that. This section of woods is pretty dense with trees, and there is a lack of understory. It has a great overstory and some nice trees coming along. It has a good mid-story, which is what these trees that I'm cutting right now, but has very little understory. No new trees, or very few new trees growing up. So if you want a healthy woods in the future, you need to have that understory in healthy condition. The way to help improve that is to get more light to the ground so that an understory has enough light to grow. And so you take out the trees that are malformed, diseased, tops don't look good, too close together. There's a number of criteria, and as I go through, I'll explain some of why a number of these trees were marked to come out. This is an overview of the woods around where I'm cutting in the video. All the trees that have paint on them are destined to be cut down. And you can see there's very few really young trees, that are only maybe 10 or 15 foot tall. Almost all of these are in the 30, 40 foot tall range. Actually taller than that, they'll have 30 or 40 foot before the first branching. Here's a couple of examples of why certain trees are marked to come down. As we first came into this, there was a tree to the right that was very malformed. And this tree that we're kind of zooming in on here at about the 8-10 foot high level, you can see that there is a big burr in the side of the trunk of the tree that is starting to rot. So this tree is not very healthy, and it is going to linger, but it's never going to amount to much as far as a tree. So diseased trees, with rot in them and galls and different things of that nature are some of the ones to be picked to come out first. Trees that are malformed and will never make good saw logs are on the list as far as things that might come out, and also certain species of trees will be on the hit list to take out. Other things in consideration is how close the trees are growing together. Are they going to interfere with each other? And if that is the case, which is the worst one? You take the worst one out. This is a repeat of the opening scene, except it's shown in real time, and I can explain a little bit more about what's going on. As I come up to a tree to take it down, I take a look up to see where it wants to fall, and if that is clear, if it has trees that it's going to get hung up in and that type of thing, then I may choose to fall it in a different direction. These three all will fall easily in the direction that I want it to go. You also look up to see if there's any dead branches that might come crashing down as you vibrate the tree. I stop and look at the direction of the fall, the way that you cut your notch, and then come in and do the back cut will determine the direction. So you'll see me pause and look at the saw and then look at the direction that I want it to go to make sure that it's going to go where I want it to go. I'm not a professional feller, so I take my time and I try to be safe with what I do and look things over 2 or 3 times rather than just look once and go for it. I'm take my time and and try to get them to go exactly where I want them to go without damaging other trees. In this situation, you can see that I'm actually falling them on top of another tree that I had fallen previously. One of the things that does is that it helps keep them up off the ground so that when you buck them into lengths for dragging and top them and that, they're up off the ground and you're less likely to hit your chain into the ground while you're cutting them, dulling the chain and having to stop to resharpen. With this tree, I do make a jump shot. I run out of gas as I'm cutting it, so I don't actually show me having to run down and get the gas and the oil and refilling it. Most of these trees are pretty small, so I'm using the smallest chainsaw that I have. It's a Husqvarna 141 with a 16-inch bar. It does a fine job on pretty much all of these. If I run into a tree that needs something a little more powerful, a little bigger, I'll grab one of the bigger saws. If all the trees I were cutting were this size, I would have one of the bigger saws. I have saws going all the way up to a 395, a Husqvarna 395. So I have, big powerful saws as well, but I try to use the saw that is appropriate for the job. This one I primarily use for topping and limbing, but since this TSI is typically dealing with trees that are smaller than 12 inches, this saw is perfect for it. Earlier, I mentioned looking out for dead limbs. Not only do you want to take a look to see if the tree you're cutting has dead limbs up in the top that might fall and catch you, you also want to look at any trees that are near it that the tree you're cutting might brush. And they can actually be a ways away. I've had trees that were 20 foot away from where I was cutting get brushed by a tree and have a limb come back toward me. So you got to look at everything. If I have a few trees that I'm going to drop in the same area, I will drop all of them and then limb all of them. The exception to that is if you're going to drop one tree on top of another and then you get a pile up of brush and makes it harder to cut. If you can keep them separate a little bit, or at least the tops separate, that works out a little bit better. You can also see that by having fallen these on that tree that was already down, that's crossways to them, I'm being able to keep my saw out of the dirt. When I'm bucking these, especially since these are firewood, I'm not taking a lot of care as far as how long or exactly how long each piece is, but I do like to cut them so that I don't have pieces much longer than 20-25 feet, because when I drag them out of the woods, I don't want them brushing good live trees that I want to have healthy in the future. If you're taking out long stems on narrow trails and you've got to make turns and stuff, they will definitely rub against other trees if they're too long and you come around the corner, and you can damage the standing trees. These trees are all hardwoods. They make great firewood. We're looking at mostly maple, little bit of beech, black cherry, various hardwoods like that. Some of this is hop hornbeam, which is pretty much a valueless tree, but it makes great firewood. Probably about 90% of what I'm cutting down will be turned into firewood. There will be some that have large enough logs that I can use them as blocking logs. I have people that will buy blocking logs for me, or I might saw them up on my sawmill if I have use for the wood. I have positioned my tractor and winch in a location actually on the trail. Most of these trees are falling across the trail, and I've set it up so that I can start dragging these off the trail, and actually I drag these right out of the woods with the winch. That's a Farmi 501 winch. It's capable of pulling about 11,000 pounds, and the tractor is a 60 horse diesel farm tractor. The cable on the winch has hookup for 4 different choker chains, so I carry all 4 chains out to these logs and kind of pre-position some of them so that I'm not carrying them with me. Then I typically hook them all on the log, so I get all the chokers on the logs that I'm going to drag. Then I hook up the cable, usually starting at the furthest one. There's always exceptions depending on what the circumstances are, but typically I start at the furthest log and work back towards the tractor with the sliders. There's one hook at the very end of the cable and then 3 sliders, so I can pull in 4 logs at a time. If these logs were 25-inch in diameter and 25 foot long, I'd probably just pull in 1 at a time. Some of the things to take into consideration when you're hooking up and what order you hook them up is how heavy the log is it going to get hung up on a stump, where do you want the logs to move to. If you've got one heavy one and you've got a light one that's out at a weird angle or whatever, you can use that heavier one to act as kind of a snatch block to pull that more towards the center of the trail or the pull and get it out. So there's a number of things you can take into consideration when you're hooking these up. For small scale logging like I do, I don't think there's anything that beats a good winch like this one and a farm tractor to be able to get around in the woods and pull logs. A lot of times you see these high stumps. People talk about, well, you can't leave those because the farm tractor, won't go over them easily and that type of thing. I don't need to. I've got about 200 foot of cable on that winch, so I can pull logs from quite a distance or quite an awkward spot without having to get the tractor right up to it. That being said, I do try to, make my pulls fairly short if possible. I don't try to get out, 200 foot because I can. In this situation, as you'll see, I've got the tractor fairly close to these logs. I'll pull them a bit, drive the tractor forward, pull them again. But then the second pull I can do right from the tractor. So everything's hooked up and I can just go. If these were saw logs, I wouldn't leave the high stumps, but because it's firewood and a lot of times the base is already compromised, in some ways I like the high stumps because I can use them as pivot points. I can hook the cable around them to use them like a snatch block. I can see them. If they're real low, you don't really see them, and it'll kind of tip you one way or the other. If they're high like that, you see them and you just avoid driving over them. Well, that's pretty much it for this one. If you liked it, please hit the like button. Please make comments. I like it when people talk to me, ask me questions. So do what you'd like.